Did you think we were done with stressful ethical dilemmas? Why, of course we are not. Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews and to another episode in my series where I recap and review every single book in the Animorphs series, except the spin-offs. Today we are talking about Animorphs 29, The Sickness, which after the last 2 years is a title that fills me with dread, but this is a Cassie book, so I'm sure it's going to be good. This book came out in 1999, May of 1999, and is ghostwritten by Melinda Metz, who actually has like a Wikipedia page and has written heaps of stuff, including the Roswell High series. So she's kind of a 90s teen book series, household name, sort of. This cover has a slug on it. Let's keep going. Cassie starts off the book reminiscing about all the times she has been in wolf morph tearing out the throat of a hawk-bajir, just to let us know that she's used to making tough decisions, which bodes well for this story. But we open in the cafeteria where Rachel and Cassie are listening in as two girls, Allison and Brittany, remark about how one of them, I think it's Allison, yes, Allison is going to ask Jake to the prom. Now, the problem with this, we know that Jake and Cassie are meant to be, well, realistically, they've kissed once, but given that she is a female character who is not his cousin, I think it's meant to be. I do actually ship them, but process of elimination. But Rachel is a good friend and tells Allison to back off because Jake is with Cassie. But Brittany counters that Jake hasn't even asked Cassie to the dance. What gives? All this time they're putting the questions to Rachel like Cassie isn't even there. So Rachel marches across the cafeteria. I had no choice but to follow. You and my cousin made me want to hurl, she said over her shoulder. Jake can face death every day, but he can't manage to ask a girl to a dance. And you're no better. I relate to Rachel's pull yourself together energy. She even asks Cassie to the dance for Jake, or more, tells both of them that they're going together. And bizarrely, Jake, who is normally Captain No, we have to be sensible, agrees they could all use a little bit of fun. Cut to the dance. Cassie's not having the best time. She's much more at home with her fingers down the throat of a goose than she is in high heels and makeup. But Axe and Tobias are there, and Rachel's there, and there's flirting between the relevant people who there needs to be flirting between whom there needs to be flirting. Let's not get pedantic. No one at the school actually recognises Tobias, despite the fact that he went there. So I guess all that time being absent as a hawk has really paid off. Paid off? Not paid off? I don't know. There is even a girl, Allison, in fact, who is interested in Axe, who is obviously not in his Anderlite form. He is in his combination mashup Animorphs mix. Hi, I wanted to know if you want to dance, Allison said. Axe nodded. I would like to shuffle my artificial hooves to the music with you, but you cannot have my body. My body. Allison backs off at that point, you're right, girl, that's a red flag. Cassie has to think about how Axe's amazing experience of taste, and I say amazing experience, tasting is an experience for Axe, is very similar to how the Yiks experience having any sense when they're in a host body. You remembering all those deep, meaningful conversations Cassie had with Aftran the Yik in book 19? But no. Yiks are the enemy. It's easier for us to do our job if we see them as evil. Pure evil. Jake pulls Cassie onto the dance floor. Neither of them are particularly good dancers, but sometimes it's nice to show off your bow to the whole school. She tries to catch Rachel's eye to suggest that maybe she should ditch Marco and have some quality time with Tobias, but then Cassie realises that there's a little lump on Axe's head, dancing to the music. Oh dear. They make their way through the group over to Axe, and they realise that the lump is in fact one of his eye stalks. He started involuntarily demorphing, and he appears to be too delirious to stop. They circle around Axe and try and pull him to the equipment room door, but alas, it's locked. Their only option is to take him to the ladies' loos. They agree to reconvene in the parking lot since it'll look extra weird if 3 guys go in there. I jerked open the door, and Brittany and Allison walked out in a cloud of Love's baby soft perfume. She wants my body! Badee! Axe screeched in terror. He broke away from me and Rachel and bolted for the main exit. And of course he's headed towards known controller Vice Principal Chapman. But a different teacher, Mr. Tidwell, grabs Axe, who he assumes has been drinking, and says they're going to need to call his parents, who are in space. So he pulls Axe out of the gym, and Chapman almost doesn't let the others follow, but they play the, oh, we have his medication card, and he lets them go for 2 minutes. They bunch in between Axe and Mr. Tidwell and try to play this off as narcolepsy, or in their words, some kind of epsy. Mr. Tidwell is staring at Axe, not budging, and then 2 hooves protrude from Axe's chest. Thankfully, Mr. Tidwell doesn't see that. He might have heard it, but Marco says someone must be letting off cherry bombs somewhere. Axe manages to get it together enough that they can march him out of there. They are almost in the clear when Axe's scorpion tail bursts out and knocks Mr. Tidwell over. I mean, it's a good thing he caught it at the right angle, or Mr. Tidwell just might not have had a head anymore. Cassie asks him if he's okay. Mr. Tidwell didn't answer. He just took me by the elbow and led me down the hall away from the others. Cassie is ready to say nothing. She's terrified of the Yik torture that surely must lie ahead. I know your friend is an Anderlite, he told me, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. My mouth went dry. My throat too. just became a total desert. I wanted to tell Mr. Tidwell that I had no idea what he was talking about, but I couldn't get out a word. I also know who you are and what you are. All of you, Mr. Tidwell continued. This is not going to go well. And then, I am him. I control Mr. Tidwell. We are both part of the Yik peace movement. We have a message for you from Aftran 942. That Yik that Cassie met in the woods that time in book 19. It's all coming full circle. Mr. Tidwell, Ilim, the Yik, reveals that Aftran has been taken by the Yiks, the non-peace wanting Yiks. She's unharmed for now, but she is going to be interrogated by Visser 3. Not ideal, because Aftran knows that the Animorphs are in fact human children. They in theory have a few days to stop this. The Visser is at some conference on his blade ship, which is a wonderful idea of just Visser 3 in like an HR meeting. Oh, fantastic. So they need to get to the Yik pool where Aftran is being held. Cassie is a smart one and realises that this is the perfect spot for an ambush. She gets back to the others and explains who Mr. Tidwell is and the whole Yik peace movement thing. The others are unconvinced, but for now they just need to get Axe out of there. Once outside of the school, they get Axe back to Andalite form, and mercifully he stays that way. They make it back to the barn, pop Axe in one of the stalls, and it's time for Cassie to use all of her medical knowledge from all the goose medicine giving to work out what's wrong with Axe. Can you tell me what's wrong with you, Axe? I asked. Have you ever felt like this before? Yam foot, he mumbled. Decidedly unhelpful, but after giving Axe some water, through his hooves of course, he becomes a little more coherent. Disease, Axe answered. Disease organisms collecting in my tria gland. Again, kind of unhelpful. And they can't even tell if Axe has a fever, because what is normal Andalite temperature? Axe manages to get it together enough to tell them that tria gland is the thing that keeps diseases away. But if it bursts, as it is liable to do in this condition, all the germs will get loose all at once. They need to remove the gland or Axe will die. His main eyes closed, his stalk eyes drooped. When temperature goes back to normal, tria gland out, or disease organisms kill. And just before he falls asleep, Axe lets him know where that tria gland is located. In his head. Yep, it's impromptu alien brain surgery time. Let's move to the other side of the barn, I said. I want Axe to get some rest. That was true, but I also didn't want Axe to hear us start to freak out, which I knew was about to happen. I think we can all agree this is pure nightmare, stress-inducing, dream, horrible, situation. So they know what temperature Axe needs to get to, and they have a bit of time while his temperature drops. So Cassie fills them in again on what Mr. Tidwell said, and the Yik problem, and Aftran, and all of the above. Probably it is a trap, but we still have to go, Rachel said, because if Tidwell or Ilim or whoever is telling the truth, we're dead meat. Aftran will crack when the Visser interrogates her, and she knows everything about us. Everything, right, Cassie? She said acidly, looking angrily at me. Very awkward, but you guys weren't in that book, and you wouldn't know what a difficult time it was and the decisions that had to be made. They decide they need to go in tonight, partly because the Yiks won't be expecting it, they won't have had time to defend yet, and also partly because they need to get back in time to operate on Axe. They really need to get the Chi involved, because if Cassie's dad comes to the barn and sees an Andalite, things are going to go terribly wrong. While Marco morphs and heads out to find Eric, the others discuss how they're going to get to the Yik pool, because the entrance they've used before is almost certainly going to be more guarded now. Alas, they draw nothing, and Eric turns up and tells them he can't move Axe, there's nowhere else he can go. And also the Chi can't help because they don't have the requisite medical knowledge. In the meantime, Marco asks the confusing question of, are there bathrooms in the Yik pool? Which there are. But why do you want to know, Marco? That means they have plumbing, pipes, and that also means we have a way into the Yik pool, Marco announced. We morph into something small, something that can swim, climb in one of our toilets, have Eric give us a flush, swim a little, and come out in one of the Yik sinks or toilets. It's a very different version of flushed away, but there we go. But Jake adds to the plan, realising that if they start in the water tower, they will, instead of being in changing pressures, they will be with the pressure of the water system the whole way. I don't understand enough about water infrastructure to evaluate that plan. I'm going to assume he's right. Tobias suggests that they morph eels, and honestly, eels in the toilet is another nightmare I'm going to have having read this book. So, Eric slips into the store with Axe in order to project a hologram of an empty stall. It won't work if Cassie's dad tries to go into the stall, but hey, it's better than nothing. Marco does point out one of the problems with this plan and sort of escalates the peril a little bit, because if Axe gets out and goes on a delirious rampage, Eric, who is programmed not to do any violence, will not be able to stop him. But it's a risk they're just going to have to take. And before they can all get themselves too worked up, Tobias comes back with an eel for them to morph. So, leaving the diseased Axe behind, they head on over to the water tower. They need to remember Eric's directions to get them from the water tower to the Yik pool, but not easy when you're in a new morph and in a very strange environment. And Axe is usually the one with the good memory, but they're gonna have to make do. Man, for a scrawny little thing with a pencil body, eels are aggressive. The eel's instincts were telling me to bite anything that moved and ask questions later. And eat. I wanted live food. Then, chomp! Sharp teeth bit into my midsection. Okay, everyone stop biting, I yelled, including me! instincts are fun. They start their harrowing journey through the pipes knowing that if they get stuck somewhere and can't demorph, they are going to be stuck as eels forever. Jake gets pulled into the wrong pipe, but by creating a chain of eels, they manage to get him out of there. Jake hesitated. He sounded woozy. Really out of it. Had he been that scared? Maybe so, but Jake had never failed to cope. Oh dear. I would have slapped myself if I'd had hands. It's a wonderful sentence. Jake was sick. Oh dear indeed. So they need to get out of the pipes for obvious reasons. Jake cannot suddenly start spontaneously demorphing here. They panic, unsure of where to go, but Tobias uses his bird knowledge to tell them to just go with the flow, follow the currents, they will make it out of there. And they do, but out of the end of a fire hose which is currently squirting water onto a burning building. Thankfully they manage to demorph and make their way up to the second floor, where they manage to morph to birds without anyone noticing and escape. It's a hard 5 minutes. Literally, that's not... sorry. Must be this stupid Yamfoot, Rachel said, helping me to hold Jake up. Jake was sick in eel form, sick in human form too. Yamfoot sounds nasty. They'll try again after school the next day. Marco walks Jake home while Rachel morphs Bird and heads back to the barn. Jake tells Tobias to go with in case Axe has gone on that rampage and they need to stop him. And if his temperature gets too low, before Jake can tell us the rest of the plan, he collapses. Marco and Cassie are starting to walk Jake back, but then it turns more into like carrying him home. We turned onto Jake's block. When we reached Jake's porch, we gently lowered him to his feet. He wobbled a little, but managed to stay upright. Don't let Tom see me, in case I morph, Jake muttered. The idea of not being safe in your own home is honestly one of the more stressful parts of this series. They get him inside and Jake's mum passes the phone to Cassie. It's Rachel letting them know that their other friend is sick much worse than Jake is. Jake probably will just have a bout of the flu. The other friend is very sick, which is a relief to say the least, but does mean all of them are probably going to get ill. I stood there, staring at the phone in my hand. If we all got sick, who was going to save Aftran? And who was going to operate on Axe? Cassie has a horrible nightmare where she has to operate on someone with no experience. The person keeps shifting, it's Axe, then it's her dad, normal stress dream stuff. But thankfully her mum wakes her up and tells her she needs to head on to school. I don't know about you, I wouldn't feel confident in a learning environment given the current circumstances. Before she heads off to school, Cassie goes to check on Axe. Eric's been monitoring, his temperature's coming down, but it's not down enough to operate just yet. She just about makes it to school and Rachel isn't there? She makes it through first period, then calls Rachel's house and yep, Rachel has the same flu. At lunch she looks around for Marco, who she also can't find, but instead finds Mr. Tidwell, who wants to talk to her about the Spanish club party, which is a terribly ominous way of saying it, given that in this case the party is you being discovered and probably killed or enslaved. It's worse because it turns out the Vista 3's seminar finished a little bit early, and Aftran's interrogation will be tonight. They need to act quickly. Cassie takes a moment to ask after Mr. Tidwell, who is obviously some way inside the body, outside the body, complicated to describe. Apparently this did originally start as an involuntary thing. He was enslaved by the Yik, but then through experiencing Mr. Tidwell's distress, the Yik, Ilim, decided to join the Yik peace movement, and now the two of them kind of work together. And now Ilim lets Mr. Tidwell speak. Obviously there's no way of confirming that that is what's happening, but let's believe it for now. Turns out Mr. Tidwell is letting the Yik say, according to the person who has a Yik in his head telling us this. His wife died, he's been pretty lonely. He likes having a purpose. Might not be true, but it's nicer to believe than Yik emotional manipulation. Look, I want to help you, I told Mr. Tidwell, Ilim, but 3 members of the group are sick. Really sick. As in 1 requiring brain surgery. Isn't there some way the Yik peace movement can rescue Aftran without our help? Short answer, no. A lot of the Yik peace movement don't currently have hosts, and those that do have hosts are not necessarily battle ready. I'm sorry to hear that members of your group are ill, but when the Visa finishes with Aftran, he will know everything, and then every Yik in the peace movement will be dead. Their hosts as well. Everyone who has ever helped you will be rounded up and made controllers, Ilim continued. Everyone you care about will be made controllers. It will all end, Cassie. The defeat will be total. And permanent. Well, when you put it that way. But then Cassie has an idea. She asks Mr. Tidwell, can Ilim the Yik survive outside of you for any period of time? And yes, so long as he's kept suspended in liquid. She runs up to Marco on the way home and tries to tell him her plan, but Marco's babbling about monkeys on the bed and all of them falling. You're scared, aren't you? I asked. I dropped back into step beside him. Yeah, I'm scared. Of course I'm scared, he shot back. Axe could die, and we're getting ready to go into the Yik pool with half our usual fighting force. Half! That is unless another one of us keels over in the next couple of hours, which could happen. He seems kind of clammy, but it's probably fine. So Cassie tells him the plan. In case you hadn't picked up on the subtle plan that was going on, Cassie wants to morph Mr. Tidwell's Yik, Ilim. Marco just starts to question this plan when he too falls ill. Looks like it's just Cassie left. Got to think about one thing, Marco said weakly. What? What if What if you pull it off? As she hauls Margot back towards his house, Cassie realises what he means. If they manage to rescue Aftran from the Yik pool, they will have a Yik with no host and no Kandrona rays. You're basically condemning Aftran to death either way. They make it back to the barn where the tracking of Axe's temperature indicates they have about 8 hours before they're going to need to operate. Or maybe not. Problem, Tobias says. His temperature has been dropping all day. His crisis could happen tonight, or a few hours from now, or basically now. I haven't been able to figure out a pattern. Sometimes it drops slow, sometimes fast. So maybe Tobias will have to do the surgery? I mean, there are supplies in her dad's bone-setting room. That makes it sound like a really ominous thing. It's for the animals. Tobias heads off to check on the sick Animorphs while Cassie checks in with Eric, who's been teaching Axe rock, paper, scissors, which he doesn't totally understand. They've only had one close call with Cassie's dad, and Tobias managed to shake up all the other animals and get him distracted. Just as Axe is about to tell Cassie where the gland is, her dad shows up. She tries to get him to leave and then... "You can't fool me, Cassie," he told me. "I know you were in that empty stall. And why." My heart gave a hard double thump. "You do?" I asked. He nodded. "You were pretending you were a horse, weren't you?" Well, parents. If only this were true. Cassie, having got rid of her dad, goes to look for a tool that she can use to cut through Axe's skull. Fun. But maybe she can just make a small hole, like a hole-cutting saw would do? She makes a pile of tools when suddenly Tobias comes back. He did not make it over to Rachel. He's getting sick too. And he falls to the floor of the barn, which is a big deal when you're a bird. She pops him into a cage where her dad can take care of him, which is convenient, but not great if Axe does need that surgery. She goes and grabs some books from her mum on animal brain surgery under that wonderful, permanent, easy solution of, I have a school report. Great to steal materials from your mother, or borrow materials from your mother. And then she says she's off to keep Rachel company, and yeah, the idea of willingly going to the house of sick people and friends when they are ill is baffling after the last 2 years, but that's what happens. She says bye to her mum, maybe for the last time, and stops in on Axe, whose temperature is still dropping fast. "Eric, Tobias is sick now too. I had to put him in one of the cages," I told him. "If Axe reaches his crisis before I get back." I really didn't want to say this, but I had to. "You can't go to my father or anyone else for help," I finished. What I was really telling Eric was that he had to let Axe die. My word, the stakes are high on this one. Cassie hops on her bike and heads on over to Mr. Tidwell's house. He seems a bit nervous that there's only Cassie involved in this plan, but they know what they've got to do. The Yik flops out of his ear onto the kitchen table. Just lovely. Though this does confirm that Mr. Tidwell and the Yik are genuine pals, that was not lies before. And in a momentous moment for the series, Cassie acquires Yik DNA. I pulled my fingers away from Ilim. Mr. Tidwell filled a Ziploc bag with water and slipped Ilim inside. Then he closed the top almost all the way and carefully placed the bag in the big patch pocket of his corduroy jacket. Lovely. And with that, Cassie morphs to Yik. It's about as gross as you would imagine. So we get some insight into how the Yiks move around when not inside the body. It's kind of an echolocation, which Cassie uses to locate Mr. Tidwell's ear, and she clambers on inside. The joy at suddenly having senses is totally overwhelming, and Tidwell has to tell her to pull herself together, and it's a bit weird rootling through his memories trying to find how to control him, but she manages it. Thank goodness knowing how to drive is something that Mr. Tidwell can take over, and they make it to the McDonald's. If you're confused about how McDonald's factors in, you're going to have to catch up on the videos, I'm so sorry. So the two of them, Tidwell and Cassie the Yik, make it through the biofilter and down into the Yik pool. I took the last few steps and entered the huge cavern. It was like a small city. Humans, Taxons, Hawk-Bajir everywhere. Buildings and sheds in a ring around the outside. Bright yellow caterpillar earth movers and tall cranes ready to continue the underground expansion. The idea made my stomach cramp. I assume at some point the whole town is just going to collapse because they've totally undermined the entire structure. They watch totally helpless as a Yik comes out of the ear of a 5-year-old boy, and the boy's put into a cage. There's nothing to do about it, just sort of a reminder of how much the Yiks suck. The non-peace movement Yiks, at least. The man in front of Cassie escapes from the line, having the Yik taken out of his head, but then gets shot in the back with a Draken beam. Hawk-Bajir controllers roughly hauled him to his feet and shoved him towards the cages. "Why couldn't you kill me?" the man shouted. "Why couldn't you just kill me?" I knew why they hadn't killed him. They hadn't wanted to destroy a good host body. Well, we've got a fair few books left in this series, and it's only going to get more intense from here. So, Cassie manages to get Ilim out of her pocket so that he can hop back inside Mr. Tidwell once this has all gone down. Then I was free, out in the Yik pool. I was blind, almost deaf and mute, but here's the strange part. I didn't care. I was with my brothers and sisters, soaking in the Kandrona rays my body craved. If I'd had a mouth, I would have let out a long ah of satisfaction. I was home. I was home. Interesting, but Cassie can't let those Yik instincts take over. She's got work to do. Cassie needs to find where Aftran is being kept, and so she uses her Yik sonar to find a box at the end of the pier, which is presumably where they're keeping this rogue Yik. Wouldn't be that hard to open the box if Cassie had hands, but obviously she's quite close to the end of that pier and people would see her. And just as Cassie's trying to come up with a plan, we hear the thought-speak yell of everyone's favourite villain. Visser 3 has arrived from the end of his seminar, and the cage starts being pulled out of the water towards Visser 3. No! I had no hands to stop it, but I had to do something now. Everyone is invited to the infestation pier. It's called the infestation pier. I hate him so much. Visser 3 said, sounding jovial, "You are invited to witness the fate of traitors." I'm imagining him in a jester outfit right now. I don't know why. You've got to sound jovial when about to do an interrogation. It's villain rules. In panic mode, Cassie swims over to the girl who currently has her head stuck in the water and clambers into her ear. As she delves through her memories, she realises this girl is a willing collaborator with the Yik. She's a member of the Sharing, which means Cassie can't let her get anything from her, or she will also reveal that the Animorphs are in fact humans. The Visser unlatched Aftran's cage, pulled her out. He held her up, digging his fingers into her defenceless flesh. "You will tell me everything about the so-called peace movement," Visser 3 told Aftran, blasting his thought-speak loud enough for everyone to hear. "Then I'll have to use my imagination and come up with a nice, long, painful way for you to die." As Visser 3 recites his monologue, Cassie runs at him across the pier. She slams into the Visser, who is too stunned to react. Cassie snatches Aftran and dives back into the pool. "Get her! Get them both! Bring them to me!" Visser 3 roared. "Get them or I will fill this cavern with your dead bodies." Now, is Visser 3's leadership style more love or fear? Can anyone tell me? Some Taxons hop into the pool and there are Draken beams firing. It's all very dramatic. Visser 3 is killing his own Yiks to get at Cassie. Smart move? She hops out of the girl's ears as the Taxon pulls her to the surface, and they have limited amount of time before they realise there is no Yik in that girl. I needed to get out of here. Now. Something with wings. I wanted wings in the worst kind of way, but before I could morph to bird I had to demorph into my human body. In the Yik pool. No. While Visser 3 twigs that, yeah, there's no Yik in that girl, she's still in the pool, Cassie morphs to Owl, because she needs to be able to carry Aftran out of there. But owls can't fly with wet wings, but an osprey can. So in osprey morph, Cassie gropes what she hopes is Aftran and flaps on out of there. I powered my wings through the sludge, pushing my body up out of the Yik pool. I knew they'd be waiting for me. There was no way to sneak out. "Visser, a bird! Shoot it, you imbecile! It must not fly!" It must. But then Cassie's body is pulled back into the pool by something. It's Visser 3 in horrifying alien morph. His new morph was terrifying. It was like a floating eyeball with long tentacles for lashes. One of those tentacles shot out and snapped me on the wing again. Numb. His tentacles were filled with poison. If I got hit too many more times, I wouldn't be able to move my wing at all. I've missed his alien morphs. Thinking of her friends, her family, Cassie manages to get the strength to fly out of the pool, and she flaps towards the stairs, and in the corner of her eye she spots Mr. Tidwell raising a fist in the air, which to everyone else will seem like, "Gah, you Animorphs," but she knows it's a sign of, "Yes, we've done it." Hawkbashir controllers fired at me from the pier. "Would it be asking too much for one of you to actually hit something?" I heard Visser 3 roar. Everyone knows generic minions have to be bad at shooting. It's the law. Then a hunter robot shows up. We met them in an earlier book, remember? If not, playlist. Cassie manages to disable its vision system with, you guessed it, poop. She tries to make it up and out, but she forgot about that Gleep biofilter. Thankfully, someone is coming down into the Yik pool at that exact moment, and she manages to zoom her way out into the restaurant where a kindly human sees a bird flapping around inside and lets her out of the door. I flew into free, wide-open skies. As Marco would say if he were here. That was interesting. Let's never do it again. But there's no time to stop and celebrate, because if you don't remember, Axe still needs brain surgery. She gets back to the barn, promising to pop Aftran in some water soon, but first she needs to check on the patient. Once she's morphed back to human, Eric tells her that Axe has reached the right temperature. Well, it's the right temperature for brain surgery. He's at crisis point. "I don't think you have much time," Eric said gently. "You're right." I stood up and slid Aftran into the water trough. "You'll be safe there," I told her. I knew she couldn't understand me. I knew she had to be terrified, but I had to leave her. So Eric scoops Axe up and pops him on the operating table. "Just take it one step at a time," I coached myself. But what should the first step be? I closed my eyes and tried to picture what my dad did before an operation and what I'd seen in the books I'd gotten from my mum. Got it. Step 1, get things clean. Duh. I just want to say that while I was reading this, I was so stressed out. This is an actual nightmare I have had of, you have to perform brain surgery with zero experience. Like, Cassie has more experience than me. I was freaking out. I would be awful in an apocalypse. "This is hopeless. It's impossible," I cried. "He's going to die with me standing right next to him." "You've already done one hopeless, impossible thing tonight," Eric reminded me. And that reminds her that Aftran is there, which gives Cassie a plan. She pops Aftran up against Ax's ear and the Yik instincts guide her inside. The plan is a long shot, but it works. Aftran is able to communicate with them and tell them where the trigland gland is, which is like right at the back of his head, even with the bottom of his ears about the size of a thumb. I'm pretty sure it would be a certain case of demonetization if I described Andalite brain surgery in as much detail as the book does, but just trust me, brain surgery happens. Cassie, he's coming too, Aftran announced, and he's starting to scream. What's wrong? I cried. Am I hurting him? No, Aftran said, her voice suddenly flat. He's screaming because there's a Yik in his head. Ax, listen to me. The Yik is Aftran. She helped me save your life, I cried. He's totally freaking, Aftran told me. He's saying you should have let him die. He would have killed himself with his own blade before he let a Yik infest him. Even though this plan worked, was it the best idea? Cassie explains to the very confused, just-had brain surgery Ax what she had to do and who Aftran is. Filthy Yik, he spat. I made the last ditch. That filthy Yik helped save your life, and she very nearly gave her life for peace between human and Yik. And now, unless I can think of some way to save her, she will die a slow death of Kandrona starvation. Ax doesn't have much to say to that, but he's just had brain surgery, so give him a little bit of time to process. As Cassie thinks about the events of the day and all Aftran has gone through and everything, she realises she really wants to have a chat, and the only way to do that is to pop Aftran into her ear. Her tone turns sombre then. Cassie, there's something I have to ask you to do for me. Anything, I replied instantly. I need you to kill me, she said, simply. Did you think we were done with stressful ethical dilemmas? Why, of course we are not. It's not so bad to die for what you believe in. There are much worse deaths, she said gently. Many worse deaths. And then there's a time jump. I was so cross. So they cut to the beach. Everyone is doing much better. Ax is still a bit shocked that there was a Yik in his head. But they're there to meet Aftran. I was very confused by this, but then a humpback whale surfaces, and that is Aftran. No, she's not in a humpback whale. She is a humpback whale. Apparently, basically, off-page, they all got together, had a meeting, and decided that the best thing to do was to use the cube, give Aftran morphing powers, let her choose what she wanted to be for the rest of forever, and she could be that, wait in it for 2 hours, and be stuck. And she chose whale. I caught Jake watching me. What? I asked. He shrugged, just wondering what you were thinking. Nothing very profound, I said. Just what? Just that every now and then, we actually win one. He nodded. Sometimes we do win, he agreed. This time, Cassie, you won. Emotions. So many emotions. If you were ever in doubt that Cassie is the best character, I hope this book changed your mind. Cassie is the best character. Cassie is phenomenal. Cassie deserves everything. I want her to have a better morph than Wolf Morph. But that's enough emotions for today. This has already been quite a long video. Thank you so much for watching. Are you enjoying this Animorphs series? Come tell me on Discord, where I have a dedicated Animorphs channel. If you are a patron, you are getting this early. If you would like to join my group of patrons who generously support videos like this, that is all linked in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one, or Animorphs 30. Gonna be some bloopers now. And Alice encounters. Does Alice encounter or Brittany encounters? Well, but hey, it's whether Tobias heads to check on the other. They watch helpless as the ear comes out of a. The ear comes out. The Visser unlashed. This is hard to say.